This is Jack Rice at the United Nations, and I'm here with John McNee. He's the Canadian ambassador to the UN. Again, Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining me.
Jack, it's my pleasure. Yeah.
I think when people think about the UN and they think about Canada, at least right now, we keep hearing about the number of Canadian troops that are in Afghanistan. Can you talk a bit about that for us?
Absolutely. There is a very big commitment by Canada with our allies and friends, starting with the United States, the UK, France, Australia, and others, in an extremely important campaign in Afghanistan to try and help the Afghan people and government rebuild their country, create the institutions of government necessary for a modern society, give them substantial development assistance, and at the same time create the security, the basic security that's necessary for any country. In this circumstance, that means taking on a pretty determined insurgency. 2,700 Canadian troops are doing that in the south of Afghanistan at considerable cost to our people. We've lost a lot of soldiers, but they have been working with the great dedication, as I say, alongside American troops and those of other nations to try and help Afghanistan. So a hugely important mission to Canada. One thing that's critical to it is that it takes place with the mandate and the endorsement of the UN Security Council for the whole operation, and that's important to Canada and to the Canadian people.
If we look at what's going on in Afghanistan, some people have said that this is a failed state, it continues to fail. So there are those in Canada saying, wait a second, every single soldier, every single Canadian we lose, it better be for the right price. Is it for the right price?
Well, what I would say is, yes, this is a very tough campaign. It's a long-term effort to rebuild that country. We have a long-term commitment, and we're putting $1 billion in Canadian development assistance over a 10-year time horizon to try and make a real difference in Afghanistan. I think it's important not only to help Afghanistan rebuild, but trying to get at some of the roots of the terrorism that brought down the Twin Towers in New York and that menaces all free societies. So the stakes are high, the challenges are great, but I think there's a general view in Canada, and you've seen it in the endorsement in our House of Commons a couple of months ago, for the continuation of the Canadian role there till 2011, the military role, that this is a cause worth fighting for.
There have been efforts across the world to get more troops in there,
right,
to have more people there other than Canadians.
Right.
How is that playing within Canada itself?
Well, I think the view in Canada is that this is essentially the NATO alliance going to work at the behest of the UN Security Council to do a job that probably NATO is one of the few organizations that has the might, the skills, the equipment to undertake. It's very important to Canada that the NATO allies contribute and pull their weight. We're delighted that the French government has decided to deploy more troops in the eastern part of Afghanistan. The United States is reinforcing its commitment. These are very close allies of Canada, and we're delighted that they're coming in, and others are helping in their own way.
Now, you're scheduled to be there until 2011. What would make you stay longer? What would make you pull out?
I think those are hypothetical questions, Jack, that are pretty hard to determine 3 years out in a very fluid situation that has changed a lot in the last 3 years. What I would say is that the Canadian commitment in Afghanistan is a long-term one to helping rebuild the society. What our Prime Minister has said is that in 2011 the nature of the Canadian role will change, and it won't be the same military contribution, but we continue to be committed to working hard there on the ground to make a difference.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining me.
Most welcome, Jack.
It's a real pleasure. This is Jack Rice at the United Nations.